talk about for the balance of this hour is how that's changed and what it means for owners, investors, and distributors of independent motion pictures and television product. And what I'd like to do to frame that is ask each of the panelists to talk a little bit about who they are and what their organizations do and what their role in the organization is. I'll start with Stephan.
Great. So I'm with a company called Snag Films, and we have two business units. One is an online trade magazine called IndieWire, which is 15 years old. And that's just a journalistic website. But more germane to this discussion is our distribution arm, which is called Snag Films. We own and operate a website, snagfilms.com, where we distribute over 3,000 films, very much like Hulu.com. It's an ad-supported business model. We primarily work with long-tail titles. Those are titles that have already gone through a traditional distribution arc and are looking for further monetization, or the films that kind of get lost through the cracks and don't get picked up by the traditional distribution. We also launched early at the beginning of this year a narrative division, and also are picking up newer films. These are films coming out of the festival circuit for which we will distribute through more traditional, transactional, cable VOD, iTunes, Netflix. And I say traditional, it's sort of the new traditional, because that's really the landscape where current independent films that are kind of coming through the festival circuit for distribution deals are going to live and thrive. Very few are getting picked up for big theatrical, although we're involved in semi-theatrical releases. So look forward to speaking more, but I'll leave off there.
I'm Bob Friedman. I am president of Radical Media and Entertainment. I have spent a large part of my life in various media, starting in the TV side of the business with MTV, and then running New Line, and then did a stint over at AOL through the various incarnations of Time Warner, with an eye toward taking branded content or franchises and exploiting them in a variety of media, because I was frightened that one day the world would come to where the world is today, that the idea of a vertically integrated company and just thinking of DVD as one thing and theatrical distribution as another. So I spent a long time sort of learning each of these distribution models. Radical is very unique in that it was originally and still is the largest commercial production company in the world. And what commercial production companies did in the old days was they had a roster of directors and producers, and Derek C. and Friends, and et cetera, and every once in a while some of those directors would want to play in the media space and develop a film, and produce a film. As a matter of fact, I had come to know Radical when I was over at New Line, and they were physically producing the film for us called The Cell with J-Lo. I wasn't sure that it was Radical at the time, but I just knew it was some great pedigree production company that was doing this. And I decided about 5-6 years ago that there was no money in the world, that the only two people that had money, or somewhat money, were advertisers that didn't know what to spend it on, and consumers. So I sort of decided that I would join and create a new kind of entertainment company, one that had different sets of economics for the development of content, whether that be television or film, or commercials, or digital, because 5 years ago the digital arena was just starting, the production of that content, and then the distribution of that content domestically. And I brought in a partner at the time, a distribution partner for the physical distribution, which was Friedman, which is a very large media distribution company owned by Bertelsmann, for my international distribution, of which at least the objectives were to do primarily television development, not film development. And they, about a year ago, they liked the razor blade, so they bought the company out. So that basically at this point in time, where we like to refer to ourselves as a transmedia company, but some of the projects in different media you've probably heard of. And in television, we do Iconoclasts, film everything, probably more docs than not, but Fog of War, we just did Crude, we're doing a big project with Paul Simon, which is going to be released theatrically but also on TV, in an innovative sort of a relationship with A&E. We, in the dramatic side of the business, which is sort of more like the feature film business today, shows like Mad Men, we had produced and developed a pilot for Mad Men. But I would still say that 70% of where we want to play is probably in the nonfiction area, primarily because, I think it's difficult, which I'm sure will become a discussion, for independents to play in the film business in the way that we used to at a studio, because we don't really manage those windows, and we're not in control of all those windows. So that's who Ritholz is.
Richard?
I'm Richard Lorber, and I have been in largely the traditional side of the distribution business since I started Fox Lorber in 1981. Although in 1981 nothing was traditional because nobody knew what was going on. It was a disruptive time before even Netflix had a hand in it. And those early years we were doing a mix of agenting deals and consulting and working with some up-and-coming producers like Lorne Michaels, who said, okay, look, take all these specials we have and figure out what you can do with them in this new media world. And so we did first home video licensing deals for Lorne, and we sold them internationally. We did syndication and various other things that were still viable. And at that time, being the young kids on the block and maybe smart kids on the block, we had other companies that asked us to be consultants and advisors. And eventually, we backed into the trailing edge of the old world of syndication and started doing traditional syndication with non-traditional programming. But the real growth was in setting up deals as licensing agents to the developing home video companies and cable networks and the like, and figuring out what that was all about. We soon realized that it was better to be a principal than an agent, and the barriers to entry were still reasonably low at that time. The other thing that was a marker throughout my career was that there was always some new technology that was getting our asses out of the jam when the old technologies were failing. There was some silver bullet. So syndication was going down the tubes, and suddenly cable emerged, silver bullet. Everybody had a new one-point buyer that was putting money on the barrelhead and getting us out of trouble. Eventually, the theatrical market was softening. There were either too many or too few screens, I don't really remember, but theatrical wasn't working. And then along came home video in the early 80s, and that became a sea change. Every street corner had a video store. Few of you are old enough to remember that. And the days changed our lives in that there was new money coming into the system. Consumers were spending dollars on things they'd never thought about spending dollars before. Eventually, video morphed, VHS morphed into another silver bullet moment, which was the emergence of the DVD. And everybody that had these creaky collections of fat VHS cassettes transitioned to recollecting now DVDs. There was a pipeline filling frenzy. And that eventually got us to today's situation where there is no more silver bullet. There's just distorter and fragmentation. Right now we're looking at a situation where there's no one media that's allowing us to monetize sufficiently to make up for the loss of the decline in the traditional media. So the question is, why am I still in this so-called traditional business? There are reasons for that. About 2 years ago, I bought a company called Kino from a very dear friend who's recently died, sadly, Don Prim. Kino Lorber is basically the successor to Fox Lorber, an interim company I had called Koch Lorber, where we specialize in international cinema, documentary features, really the best of the art house concept programming that's around. We compete with companies like Criterion, but we are creating the classics of tomorrow as much as acquiring and releasing the classics of yesterday. We release over 25 films a year theatrically. Many of them are small, very specialized releases, but they all open in New York and they play major markets and they get phenomenal reviews and make very little money. But that doesn't necessarily mean the demise of